INEC says the recent spate of attacks on its offices and facilities might jeopardize or pose threat to the conduct of elections in Nigeria. And tonight we take a deeper look into the recovery of Iboru loot. The Attorney General of the Federation is our guest tonight on the program, and he'll be talking to us on Buhari's anti-corruption war. Stay with us, everyone. Hello, everyone, and welcome to Politics Today live on Channels Television. I'm Sean Kimbale, and I'm live with you from our Abuja studio in the nation's capital in this midweek edition of the program. And for the next 60 minutes, I will be driving this program for you to get the latest that you need to know. So let's begin with some sad news as relating to our elections. Yet again, the Independent National Electoral Commission, INEC, has been hit with two different attacks on their offices in Ebonyi State today. The chairman of INEC, Professor Mahmoud Yakubu, met with resident electoral commissioners across the country to find a way to stop the spate of attacks. The chairman notes that it is an emergency meeting to review some of the developments since their last meeting. He said that the spate of arson and vandalism of state offices has become very troubling to the commission and warns that the damage to the materials were total and attacks are targeted on INEC but are capable of affecting the commission's ability to conduct elections. Take a listen to Professor Mahmoud Yakubu.
In the last 3 weeks or so, 3 of our local government offices in Asian Udim in Akwa Ibom State, Ohafia in Abia State, and Udenu in Enugu State have been set ablaze by unidentified persons. Last Sunday, 16th May 2021, our state office in Enugu suffered yet another arson and vandalization in which parts of the building were ransacked and several vehicles razed. And more of our facilities are being systematically targeted and attacked. Surely these attacks are no longer freak events, but appear to be quite orchestrated and targeted at INEC. Clearly, these are acts of unjustifiable aggression which may undermine the Commission's capacity to organize elections and dent the nation's electoral process. The Commission will certainly work with the security agencies to deal with the perpetrators of these heinous crimes according to the law. To this end, a meeting with all the security agencies is holding on Monday, 24th May 2021.
Worrisome situation there. So we have so much to talk about tonight, and we have some of them issues that you need to listen to, especially some clarification that you need from the federal government relating to the way and manner things are going in the country, plus some of the monies that are being recovered. Where are they going exactly? Stay with us. But before we go into that, let's check out some of your political roundup stories.
A new national carrier is set to take off in the first quarter of 2022. The Minister of Aviation, Hadi Sirika, told State House correspondents today that there was a forced postponement of the planned date for its establishment, which was earlier due by the end of 2021 owing to the COVID-19 pandemic. The Aviation Minister explains that the ministry will return to Council in 2 weeks to submit a memo with an outlined business case for the carrier for Council's approval.
Nigeria is the best candidate for a very robust carrier.
Arsonists have set ablaze 3 offices of the Independent National Electoral Commission in Ebonyi State. Persons suspected to be hoodlums torched INEC offices in Ebonyi, Izi and Eza North local government areas. Sensitive and some non-sensitive materials are reported to have been burnt in the incident, which happened in the early hours of today.
Gravity of the destruction was so alarming to the extent that the buildings are collapsed.
Imo State Governor Hope Uzodinma has signed into law a bill to establish the Imo State Security Organization. The bill was signed at the Government House in Owerri, the state capital, to give legal backing to the security outfit established to assist other security agencies to maintain law and order. Governor Uzodinma says the security organization will also help prevent unauthorized persons from being in possession of firearms, as well as collecting intelligence that will assist security agencies in fighting crime in Imo State.
The law has been passed, and now it has to work for the purpose.
Let's also tell you that the Senate has gone on recess, and this is to enable lawmakers to participate in the two-day public hearing on the Constitution Amendment. But the Senate President, Hamid Lawan, said that the National Assembly holds no predetermined position on any issue of interest to Nigerians ahead of the moves to amend the 1999 Constitution. Ahmed Lawan made this known during plenary today in his remarks after reading a letter signed by the chairman of the Constitutional Review Committee, Senator Ovie Omoagege, to announce the chairmanship composition to oversee a two-day public hearing across the 6 geopolitical zones on proposal to alter the provisions of the 1999 Constitution.
This is a very important exercise for our country, and I will take this opportunity to appeal to all Nigerians who have one issue or the other that they think the Constitution Review Committee of the Senate should know and take note and address. It's an opportunity to go to the center nearest to you. We are open. We are plain. We don't have any preconceived or predetermined positions on anything. The numerous issues that Nigerians feel should be addressed to make Nigeria better, to make citizens cured, and enhance the welfare of our people are upmost in our consideration.
So let's get to the conversation of tonight. Nigeria now has the possession of the £4.2 million Ibori loot from the United Kingdom. The Attorney General of the Federation and Ministry of Justice, Abubakar Malami, confirmed that the federal government of Nigeria has received the loot associated with the family members of the former Delta State Governor, James Ibori. The minister says that the amount has been credited into the designated federal government account with Naira equivalent value of the amount as of 10th of May 2021. Tonight, we have the Attorney General and the Minister of Justice, Senior Advocate of Nigeria, Abubakar Malami, to talk more about this. He joins us here in our Abuja studio. Thank you so much, Honorable Minister, for coming tonight.
Thank you, Sheil.
I must say congratulations on the final receipt of that tranche. It's 100 million that you expected. So you've gotten something less than 10% now. That's 4.2 million in total. Now that you have the money, you had stated earlier that the monies will go into for 3 federal projects. Is that still the plan?
Well, certainly is a plan. And it is a plan against the background of the international commitment that has been given by Nigeria to United Kingdom as it relates to the process of engagement, process of negotiation, inbuilt transparency and accountability associated with the process. The way international diplomatic processes operate with particular regard to the recovery of looted assets is more or less about engagement among the nations of interest. In these circumstances, Nigeria and UK. So how does it operate? It is a process that does not allow for the hook, line, and sinker operation, application, and enforcement of Nigerian law exclusively, but it's a process that factor mutual consideration among the parties of interest. And that mutual engagement That mutual negotiation gave rise to what we had as an agreement signed by the two parties, the Nigeria and UK. And embedded in the agreement is an understanding of factors relating to transparency and accountability, on account of which Nigeria and UK came to terms relating to the application of the funds recovered, which understanding is that an understanding that key projects existing in the nation, Abuja-Kano Highway, Lagos-Ibadan Expressway, and Second Niger Bridge should be considered for the purpose of deployment of these resources with a view to ensure that key infrastructural development projects that affect the entire nation be the utmost the beneficiaries of these funds. And within the context of the understanding reached, against the background of the agreement signed, I do not see Nigerian state deviating or perhaps in any way operating in breach as far as that understanding is concerned.
So it's cast in stone?
It's certainly cast in stone as far as the limited recovery that has already been made. But then one cannot rule out the possibility of perhaps certain extraneous considerations as it relates to the larger sum being expected, which is within the region of over around 80 million pounds.
So the governor of Delta State was on the program shortly after we had an interview with you, and you made an announcement to Nigerians about the success that you have achieved in getting these monies back. But he also said there's been some communication between your office, his office, your office, and the president, seeking and playing that money should be plowed for the Delta people, especially for some certain projects that they have allocated or they have mentioned. Are you thinking or considering the plea of the Delta State government in this regard?
You see, truly there has been such communication or correspondence that has emanated from the state down to the federal government with a particular regard to request for reconsideration. But the point that I think is important for consideration is the fact that the recovery is a function of mutual agreement. And mutual agreement as agreed between two nations. So it's not an issue that is exclusively within the powers of the federal government as it stands to revisit without recourse to United Kingdom, from which country these funds were recovered. So again, the background of the fact that an agreement has been signed, again the background of the sanctity of an agreement, it is difficult within the limited consideration of the sanctity of an agreement, within the limited consideration of the international diplomacy, to bring in new considerations after indeed the whole process has been consummated. So in as much as there exists such correspondence from Delta State government, the fact remains that that consideration perhaps can be a kind of considerable proposal as it relates to further negotiations. But as it is, the issue that borders on 4.2 has been signed, sealed, and delivered. And Nigeria does not stand a possibility of revisiting same after the repatriation. Perhaps it could have been a possibility before the signing of the agreement, before the repatriation of the money, but certainly not after.
I mean, it's intriguing, isn't it, Honorable Minister, that the UK seems to be at, they seem to be stronger than us that have the money. Unfortunately, these monies were looted, they are Nigerian money. Why are they the one dictating the tune in this regard? It is Nigerian money.
Well, the tune has not been exclusively dictated by UK. What happened was a product of negotiation. But I think the question that you need to ask yourself, why must a Nigerian consider UK as a destination for looted asset? If Nigerian asset is not looted down to UK, UK couldn't have a say as to what we do. So I think the question is not about the UK, but why the people involved consider UK as a destination. If no asset is taken to UK certainly couldn't have a say over, over the looted asset. But when you have taken a decision to now a kind of take your asset to a particular location, or perhaps even to a bank for upkeep, it is only natural that when you go to the bank, you must naturally allow for certain processes that will be dictated by the bank. Even in respect of legitimate assets that are taken to the bank for safekeeping, for example, is it not the tradition that you must allow a bank to have, say, verification of signature, for example? So even when you take your legitimate asset to a bank, it is only logical that the custodian of the asset, so the institution that has taken your asset for safekeeping must have a say one way or the other for the purpose of verification, much less of assets that are said to be looted, taken into a destination. Why must you consider my country as a destination for looted assets?
I'm worried, perhaps the reason why I'm asking this question is because some lawyers and eminent Delta citizens have protested. And when we wonder that, is it not possible, how much of a strong commitment is Nigeria has made with the UK on this front, such that we cannot even review. I mean, if we have a rethink on what we want to use the money for, is it so strong that we cannot have a review and say, okay, UK, forgive us, we wanted to use it for Kano, Lagos, Ibadan, but now we want to take it to Delta?
You see, whatever perhaps consideration you want to factor as far as negotiations are concerned, there must be free negotiations, pre-execution of an agreement consideration. After an agreement is reached, you cannot bring to bear any extraneous consideration in terms of breaching them. That is what I call the sanctity of an agreement. We stand a chance to negotiate to whatever extent. We stand a chance to discuss and agree to whatever extent before the execution of an agreement. But as you rightly know, and as known by every legal practitioner for that matter, that you are saying have foot across or canvas situation, you are right, within the context of an agreement is free execution rights, pre-execution capacity to discuss, negotiate, and agree. After an agreement is signed, sealed, and delivered, that is when the sanctity of it comes into play. And once the sanctity has set into an agreement, I think your rights, liabilities, obligations, and associated considerations are inherent and not extraneous.
So if are you also considering those individuals and even the state government that are considering legal action in this regard?
You cannot rule out the possibility of a legal action, but no legal action can now operate to perhaps maybe bring UK to table for the purpose of renegotiating, because as far as this agreement is concerned, it's signed, sealed, and delivered. So the issue is whether within the context of that agreement there exist legal rights and obligations that can undo what has been done within the context of.
So what if Nigeria changes its mind? Would the UK withhold the rest of the money?
That could be a reputational issue within the context of international diplomacy, because you are in agreement and you are expected within the context of the sanctity of agreement to be bound by what you have agreed upon. If by whatever position, in fact, what happens relating to the series of recoveries that have been successfully recorded by this government was on the basis of the reputation that has been established by the government of President Muhammadu Buhari. The first major recovery that was made of $322 million from Swiss, the agreement was it was going to be deployed to social investment program of the federal government to targeted at the poor. And then we were indeed established to have kept to our promise by way of ensuring that those 322 were adequately deployed for that purpose. Again, the second major tranche that was recovered from US, UK, and island of Jersey, which was around 311 million US dollars, was agreed to be deployed on Abuja Kano, Lagos Ibadan, and second Niger bridge, and it was effectively deployed. That has over time succeeded in establishing a refutation on the part of the government of President Muhammadu Buhari internationally, and that is what is unfolding now to allow for easy repatriation. When some other countries across the world were finding it very difficult to recover a dime from international community, Nigeria has been having it so good, arising from the fact that the reputation of the government in place, government in power, has been internationally acknowledged, internationally accepted, and then the international community is playing ball, is indeed accepting to deal with Nigeria for the purpose of such reputation. So if by any stretch of imagination, Nigeria now decides to operate in breach, that will have an implication, and the implication is an implication that will now affect the international credibility, international transparency, international diplomatic sanctity of an agreement, international acknowledgement and indeed sanctioning of the sanctity of an agreement. And that will now have indeed a serious repercussion on us as a nation in terms of international rating, international credibility, and international dealings.
And when we wonder what Transparency International, based on their measurement, and those who are alleging that some of these loots are being relooted, how do you assure Nigerians that this is not so?
Well, the major assurance you can see, for example, is the fact that we were committed to programs as far as these looted assets are concerned. And the question is whether the programs agreed upon were indeed executed. When we talk, for example, of the first 322 million US dollars realized from Switzerland, the commitment was for social investment programs. We are living witnesses to what has been done by the government as it relates to earn power, as it relates to trader money, as it relates to school feeding programs, and a lot of other programs that were established by the federal government over time, with particular regard to that, the 322 million US dollars recovered. When we were internationally committed to application of the 311 million US dollars that were recovered from island of Jersey, United States of America, and UK, which was agreed to be deployed and indeed applied for the purpose of Abuja Kano, Lagos Ibadan, and second Niger bridge, it is visible that the work is ongoing and progressing rapidly for that matter. That establishes a refutation, that establishes an understanding. And over and above all this, recovered asset is a factor in our national budget. It was one of the items listed for the purpose of the funding of the budget. So I think in terms of transparency, in terms of accountability, this is a government for the first time that has now done extraordinarily well in terms of visibility of the asset recovered, its application, disposal, and indeed associated benefits associated with it. The benefits are clear, open, and transparent for all discerning Nigerians to see. They are not issues that are hidden. The money is recovered, the agreement is there, it's going to be deployed in so projects. The projects are visibly being seen. So I think as far as the government of President Muhammadu Buhari is concerned, the transparency, accountability associated with the recovered assets is visible.
And you are making it public. There is a way to track this for an average Nigerian.
Very well, very much public. I think the End Power program, as it relates to the 322, is common knowledge. Is there any contention over it as to its operation? The trader money, is there any contention about it? School feeding program, any contention about it? And associated multiple social investment programs. I think they are visible, they can be seen, and people are living witnesses to what obtains in relation to them. What of the projects, the infrastructural development projects, are they not ongoing? Are they not visible for Nigerians to see? I think the transparency is indeed apparent, and there are no questions about them.
AGF, I mean, you are a senior lawyer, so I'd like to know, the agreement you had with the UK to repatriate this money, was it gazetted? It's been enacted into law?
Yeah, there is no point about gazetting the law. An agreement, for example, for that matter. What matters fundamentally is the decision of the Federal Executive Council. Upon negotiation, you understand, what you need to do further is perhaps to bring it to Federal Executive Council for it to be sanctioned. And once it is sanctioned by the Federal Executive Council, that is where it stops. There are agreements in law, you understand, treaties that requires domestication by way of, the National Assembly. But this is one agreement that does not fall within the context of the requirement of the law as far as domestication by the National Assembly is concerned.
What about the Section 12 of the Constitution?
That says what?
Which says that no treaty between the Federation and any other country shall have the force of law until it's being enacted into law by the Parliament.
You cannot read the provision of Section 12 of the Constitution exclusively without bringing into consideration other laws that are in existence with particular regard, for example, the treaties and enforcement relevant laws. Over and above the provision of the Constitution you are talking about, there exist valid, subsisting, and operational laws passed by the National Assembly, assented to by the President, with particular regard to treaties, agreements, enforcement of treaties and agreements. So it's not a provision that you can read in isolation. Why? Because all the two laws are valid and subsisting. And the treaties enforcement...
So Section 12 is not valid? There is a...
Not that it's not valid, but you can appreciate its validity within the context of community reading of the prevailing laws that has to do with treaties and indeed agreements enforcement within the context of the Nigerian situation. Because the law, the Constitution, is not the only operational law as far as the Nigerian situation is concerned.
But it's the ground norm.
So it's the ground norm. But then within the context of the ground norm, you have associated laws. If you are talking of corruption, for example, even though Section 15 of the Constitution is categorical about the fight against corruption, but within the context of the Constitution, you have EFCC Establishment Act of 2004. So you can, in determining what constitutes corruption, in determining how it should be fought, in determining the way processes and associated considerations related to corruption, you cannot read the Constitution exclusively without recourse to associated legislations with particular regard to EFCC, ICPC, Code of Conduct, Police Act, and others, and a host of others.
Let's take a breather, Attorney General. I would like to know, because there are a lot of monies that have been stolen, unfortunately. A lot of Nigerians are poor, but leaders in the past have stolen a lot of money outside of this country. I would like to know which of these other monies you are chasing. But we'll go on break, and when we come back, you'll be telling us more. Don't go anywhere, everyone. We'll be right back. Our conversation with the AGF and Minister of Justice continue after now. Thank you so much, everyone, for staying with us right here on Channels Television's Politics Today. It's a 1-hour edition of the program, the midweek edition. And the Attorney General of the Federation and the Minister of Justice, Abubakar Malami, Senior Advocate of Nigeria, is our guest tonight. Thank you so much,
Thank you very much,
AGF, for your time tonight. Before I get off the matter of anti-corruption, perhaps I have one or two things I'd like you to clarify. I was going to ask you, is there any other kind of fraud or loot that is out there that you're chasing that is of this magnitude that Nigerians need to know about?
Well, in all sincerity, what has been recovered over time will be a child's play if what we are pursuing eventually succeed in terms of recovery. Only yesterday, I had an elaborate meeting with some of the, with a head of the security or perhaps anti-corruption agency as to the strategy to be deployed in terms of recovery as it relates to a very heavy asset that has been, that has constituted a subject of investigation. we are pursuing a very heavy recovery relating to two personalities, and investigation, intelligence, and associated work relating to such recovery has advanced to, has reached an advanced stage. And I can assure you that with the collaboration the anti-corruption agencies, we are having with the anti-corruption agencies, with particular reference to EFCC, I see us making a great headway in terms of making monumental, I call it monumental, recovery of looted assets very soon.
It's perhaps in the UK, I guess.
Well, it is not particularly located as a single location, but then it includes the UK, it includes Swiss, and a lot of other jurisdictions. But they are all connected to perhaps one or two personalities. And I can assure you the recoveries are going to be monumental.
And these are perhaps politically exposed persons in past governments?
Naturally, they are politically exposed persons.
There was a matter relating to the former petroleum minister, which the EFCC came out and said they were expecting her back into the country. What are you doing in that respect?
Well, you see, as I stated earlier, it all borders on mutual collaboration, cooperation among, and synergy among the ministries, departments, and agencies of government. And I think we have never had it so good in terms of collaboration among the agencies of government, anti-corruption agencies. And we have been discussing working locally and internationally in local and international collaboration in that regard. So what I want to say clearly is that the apparent collaboration pervading, there is no limit to what successes we can achieve, and we are making substantial progress in that direction.
It's good to know. And how soon do you think this might come?
Well, I cannot be precise in point of time. Why? Because it is not a local, it is not merely a local engagement. It is an engagement and collaboration that includes international community, and you cannot be in control of time as to the speed at which they can cooperate with you. But then we are indeed happy with the level of cooperation and collaboration we have been getting from the international communities affected. And with that in mind, I think it is going to be soon.
Okay. Let me get your view on the Lagos State Public Complaints and Anti-Corruption Commission law, which was passed in April this year. Some experts have argued that it conflicts with the functions and intent of the EFCC and the ICPC Act. The provision of the Lagos law, some experts have also argued that it's far-reaching. What is the stance of the federal government on this state law and its jurisdictions?
Well, the position of the federal government is a position that borders on law. And the law is clear. Where there is inconsistency between the federal law and the state law naturally gives way. So I think it is a function of law. We look at it, we have been looking at it from the perspectives of law, and we shall certainly do the needful within the context of consistency or otherwise.
You think it's conflicting? Do you hold that view?
There is no doubt, there is no way you can make a local or perhaps a state law subservient, the federal law subservient to local law. It's a constitutional position, constitutional provision. And even within the context of law formation, the legislation, the state must naturally operate within the constitutional bounds. So where there are breaches that are constitutionally, where there are breaches that are indeed against the tenets of the Constitution, which you call the ground norm, certainly the state law cannot prevail over the federal law, and that is the position of the law, and that is the position we maintain as a federal government, and we will certainly do the needful to ensure due compliance with the constitutional tenets as far as this country is concerned.
You fear there might be some constitutional crisis in that regard. And what are you doing specifically? Are you taking it up to the Supreme Court for?
We will do the needful. We will do the needful. I am not giving you a clear-cut position, but no possibility is outruled as far as ensuring the supremacy of the federal legislations.
So you are taking it up?
Certainly.
So let me also ask you, you talked about terror funding, and you mentioned several people that are under your watch in this regard. How far have you come? A lot of people have said, mention names, let us know, name and shame. Even the UK and the US government have said, the Nigerian government, that what is being done to Nigeria in terms of terrorism and insecurity, these things are grave. Naming and shaming for Nigerians might as well help in the psychology and in the fight against this insecurity. What more can you tell us about that?
Well,
any name that you can give now?
Well, as far as I'm concerned, it's not about naming and shaming exclusively, but about consequences. Within the context of the consequences, we shall certainly act. And within the context of acting, we shall certainly prosecute. And within the context of prosecution, we have taken steps to ensure that terrorism funding is indeed squarely addressed within the context of the law. So what we have succeeded in doing is, one, effective investigation, two, establishing effective connection, and then three, taking steps to block the funding while we take further steps to prosecute. So it is no longer about the issue of naming and shaming, but there must naturally be consequences, and the consequences are naturally following.
I mean, what do you have to say? Because when you are chasing some of these monies, you perhaps will see the trail and the involvement of the parties that are involved in all of this. Do you see more than individuals that are involved in some of this?
Well, honestly, you see the investigation. Quite all right, the investigation is ongoing and has reached advanced stage in terms of establishing the necessary connections. And within the context of the investigation, we have taken steps to block the funding as it relates. So investigation as it relates to individuals and perhaps institutions as well. But I wouldn't like to be preemptive in terms of to what extent we have gone, because it may end up undermining what we are doing. But then certainly in a couple of days, you hear from us as to what we are doing. We are not sparing anyone. We will certainly deal with it squarely without fear or favor. That I can assure you.
When you talk sometimes about terror funding, there is usually some level of measurement in terms of the money. How big is this terror funding?
I am not in a position to give you, I wouldn't like to disclose anything associated with the investigation and the volume of the investigation as it is, but it's certainly going to be made public at the appropriate time. Okay. Well, I wouldn't like to give any preemptive position that will affect what we are doing in terms of investigation and the preparations associated with it as it relates to prosecution. But one thing I can assure you, a lot of disclosures were made, a lot of findings were made, and then, in fact, the funding is amazing in terms of volume. It's indeed quite huge as far as the discoveries, revelations, and indeed the investigative reports that have been unfolded arising from the investigation there too.
All right, some breaking news right here on Channels Television, everyone. We can tell you that the Nigerian Labour Congress has suspended its 5 days working strike in Kaduna State. The Nigerian Labour Congress, that is the NLC, today says that it has suspended its 5-day warning strike, which it started on Monday. Announcing the suspension, the NLC President Ayuba Waba says the decision is to honor the invitation of the federal government tomorrow to mediate in the dispute between Labour and the Kaduna State government. Breaking news right here on Channels Television. The impasse between the Labour and the Kaduna State government has been broken now, as the NLC says it has suspended the 5-day warning strike in Kaduna State, and the Labour says that it will honor the invitation of the federal government tomorrow to mediate in a dispute between Labour and the Kaduna state government. So, Honorable Minister, let's get back to our conversation. On the matter of agitation that we see in the country linked to the issues of insecurity, what in your view do you think is underlining at the bottom of this insecurity issue?
Well, the factors could be multifaceted and multidimensional. The one factor that you cannot rule out as a possibility is the political undertone. It is unfortunate that perhaps our political elites are perhaps maybe of the opinion that the best way to force concessions politically is to instigate, promote, and support perhaps insecurity. I am considering it from that perspective, taking into consideration that leadership is about responsibility. Our elites and politicians, for that matter, coming out to speak against insecurity pervading in the nation? My answer is they are not doing enough. The further consideration associated with it, is there any consensus building among the elites, Nigerian elites, as it relates to addressing the insecurity situation? The answer is no. We are living witnesses to what obtains in other countries of the world, that nobody plays politics with insecurity. Once insecurity, life of an individual citizen is taken in some other environment, it is about collective consensus coming together to address it. But here we are, having political elites celebrating insecurity, celebrating destruction of lives and properties without them coming together to now address it. They are more or less celebrating the insecurity as perhaps maybe a factor of incapacitation on the part of a ruling government.
You don't think for those who are crying or voicing their views about what they see as injustice in the land, who have linked the injustice, the insecurity to injustices?
Well, if you are talking of injustice, for example, against who?
That's the allegation that they're taking. That, for example, let me ask you, AGF, what's your view on the issue of restructuring?
Well, you see, my view about restructuring as well cannot be divorced from the political undertone. Now, take, for example, what we have existing as a structure. As tiers of government, we have federal, state, and local government. Now, coming down to the local government, what is happening to the local government? Those that are clamoring for restructuring, what have they done in terms of ensuring the efficiency, functional efficiency of the local government at the local government level? Here we are having a governor clamoring for restructuring and denying a local government, which is a tier of government, the financial resources to function effectively.
But on a larger note,
yes,
does Nigeria need restructuring?
Well, I think it is all about, when you talk of restructuring, what are you talking about precisely, so that I can answer you within the context of your understanding of restructuring?
Great. And I like the fact that you asked me that question, because restructuring means different things to different people. A lot of people have defined it in different ways. But let me throw back the question to you, AGF. To this government under President Buhari, what does restructure mean?
Well, as far as this government is concerned, structuring is allowing the functionality of the democratic structures. You cannot be clamoring for restructuring in a system whereby you have a responsibility to allow the existing tiers of government to operate. You are denying them functional operation, and you are shouting restructuring. You cannot claim for restructuring in a situation whereby three arms of government, you have the responsibility to allow them to flourish and operate optimally. You are undermining their operations by denying them the autonomy granted constitutionally, and yet be clamoring for restructuring. So within the context of restructuring, what matters most is allowing the democratic structures, allowing the federal structures to operate optimally. Until we now learn to allow these structures to operate optimally, there is no way we can have the benefit associated with those structures. So in a situation whereby the elites, whereby our political elements are denying these structures to operate optimally, I don't think there is any justification for for perhaps clamoring for restructuring that is not in any way well packaged. As far as I'm concerned, I do not understand what restructuring any political individual is talking about, against the background of the fact that, by the other hand, he is denying the existing constitutional structures to operate optimally.
So when the southern governors are asking for restructuring, you're throwing back to them that they need to go and restructure their state. Is that what you're saying?
It's truly, because they cannot deny, for example, the local government to operate optimally. They cannot deny the autonomy of the legislature, state legislature, and state judiciary, and still be clamoring for restructuring. What structuring are we talking about?
But those who have, for example, let's take one item at a time.
Yes.
The issue of devolution of power.
Yes.
Do you think that the federal government carries too much? The concurrent and the exclusive legislative list, do you think that that issue be tampered with?
All powers are indeed embedded in financial autonomy. What have they done to allow the local government structures to operate optimally? Take, for example, a situation whereby a local government council is entitled, among others, to participate in the security arrangement of a state. And then the local government council chairman is denied of the fund to run the local government. With the fund, he can now deploy the resources down to the village head, down to some other associations operating with it. But now you deny him the resources available to make them available to a village head. Even if a village head has intelligence report about a criminal existing within the society, he is denied of the limited resources that he could use to come over to the local government council chairman to notify him, for the local government council chairman to come over to the state DSS headquarters, for example, or the police to notify. Then what are you talking about?
So you will not advise the president to listen to those calls for restructuring?
They should address it at their own level first, and then let us see what happens before now coming over to the president. It's not about the president. It's about denial of the functionality of the structures at the bottom, at the lower level. And that is what, indeed, restructuring is all about. If you allow the state legislature to operate optimally, the checks and balances required will be there. If you allow the local government council to operate optimally, the necessary development in terms of devolution of powers are there. But once you deny them the resources to operate, the autonomy to operate, then certainly you cannot, you do not have a legitimate right to clamor, to perhaps agitate for any restructuring. So, because you are not a believer in allowing the process to operate optimally in terms of taking its natural course.
So for you, restructuring call is dead on arrival? I
don't even understand what they are talking about restructuring against the background of denial of the other existing structures to operate.
So they also called, that they asked and they said, actually, that they've banned open grazing across southern region of the country. What's your view on that?
Well, it's about constitutionality. Within the context of the freedoms expressed in our Constitution, enshrined in our Constitution, can you deny a right of a Nigerian? For example, it's as good as saying perhaps maybe the northern governors coming together to say that they prohibit spare parts trading in the north. Does it hold water? Does it hold water for a northern governor to come and state expressly that he now prohibits spare parts trading in the north?
But when the governors came together and said, this is the problem that we've seen, and this is the solution, and they felt, look, the solution will be stop the open grazing across the land, stop the transportation by foot of cattle.
If you are talking of a constitutionally guaranteed right, the better approach to it is to perhaps, you have spoken earlier about the constitutional amendment, is to go back to ensure the Constitution is amended. The Constitution, freedom and liberty of movement, among others, is established by the Constitution. If by an inch you want to have any compromise over it, the better approach is to go back to the National Assembly. Open grazing should be prohibited, and see whether you can have the desired, perhaps, support for the constitutional amendment in that respect. But it is indeed a dangerous position for any governor in Nigeria to think that he can bring about any compromise on the freedom and liberty of individuals to move around.
All right. So, AGF, should you mention what you think the state government should be doing? If they do their part, what is the federal government ready to do to restructure?
The federal government has been working wonderfully in that direction in terms of ensuring the autonomy of perhaps maybe the state legislature, autonomy of the judiciary, and indeed the optimal operation of that matter of the local government as a tier of government. So until such time when other political elements, political leaders come to terms with the reality of the situation, of allowing these institutions to operate optimally, any idea of restructuring is indeed a kind of, I do not know how best to describe it, but certainly does not hold water.
So, should we be expecting anything under this government as relating to 2014 confab, or that you're not considering it?
Well, I am not in a position in my own right to make any perhaps maybe specific position without recourse to the system. But one thing I can tell you that we are doing what we are supposed to do. Executive Order number 10, for example, relating to the autonomy of the state legislature, state judiciary, is there. And then as it relates to the local government, for example, doing as much as possible in terms of ensuring that they are given the, they are allowed to operate optimally. These are some of the things that the federal government is pushing hard and working hard to ensure. So within the context of the powers available at the disposal of the federal government, I think in terms of deployment or perhaps devolution of powers, I think these are steps that need to be strengthened. Consensus building should be around allowing these institutions of the state to operate optimally. That, I think, should be the starting point.
All right, we're out of time and we need to go, Honorable Minister. But before we do that, just a short one. Where do you think the presidency should be zoned to in 2023?
Well, you see, the zoning arrangement, generally speaking, I think is political. And I'm here as the Attorney General of the Federation of Nigeria and not as the chairman of a political party.
I just want to get your view as a politician, too.
Well, I have no views over it, honestly, because one, I think is preemptive, taking into consideration that we are just 2 years down the ladder in terms of the tenure in office. And I think the concentration of mind should be more on development, and that is what we are struggling to achieve much more than the political. I am not expecting that question. My mind is not prepared over it in terms of consultation, and politics is about consultations.
Thank you so much, Honorable Attorney General of the Federation and the Minister of Justice, Senior Advocate of Nigeria, Abubakar Malami. Thank you so much for your time tonight.
Thank you, Sheung.
Appreciate it.
Very grateful.
Well, that's our show for today, everyone. Many thanks for watching. I'm Sheung Okimale. Bye-bye.